Electronics and appliance retailer Noel Leeming has been given a serve for misleading shoppers over delivery times. The chain has had a formal warning from the Commerce Commission after it likely broke the Fair Trading Act by promising items bought by customers would arrive in a couple of weeks. That's despite one shipment already being overdue and without checking whether the products were actually available. Anna Rawlings from the Commerce Commission details exactly where Noel Leeming went wrong.
We've issued a warning to Noel Leeming for accepting payment for some products which it didn't have in stock to fulfil the orders that were taken. And in addition, it advertised a product with a 1 to 2 week time frame for delivery, but it already had some overdue existing orders and it hadn't taken any steps just to make sure that it could meet that delivery time frame.
So to be specific, was it the taking of the money and promising delivery within a certain time period, or was it just the delivery?
Well, the first one related to products which were ordered but weren't actually in stock, so those orders couldn't be fulfilled. And the second one related to a delivery timeframe that just wasn't realistic in the circumstances that we consider Noel Leeming hadn't adequately investigated to make sure they could meet their delivery promise.
So they were misleading customers, in essence telling them that something would arrive pretty soon when actually they had no idea when it would arrive.
That's right, or they were relying on the usual supply chain, and these issues arose as a consequence of COVID and through June and July in relation to the 1 to 2 week delivery time frame. And so supply chains had been disrupted, and the Commission considered that Noel Leeming hadn't taken adequate steps to investigate that and just to make sure that the promises about delivery timeframes could be met.
Surely they knew there were already existing problems.
Well, like many businesses, they were facing pretty unprecedented consumer demand, particularly during the lockdown period with online sales, and delivery services were really disrupted across the board. But in our view, it should have, in those circumstances, taken a more cautious approach and made sure that the representations about product availability and delivery could be fulfilled.
In reviewing this situation, though, was it simply a mistake or was it intentionally misleading customers? Because the information that you've released says they already knew that they had one shipment that was overdue. So did they intentionally mislead customers in telling them a product was going to be turning up soon, or was it a genuine mistake?
Well, what we've said is that the delay that was obviously experienced with that existing order ought to have put them on notice to really take some steps to establish that the promises being made about delivery timeframes could be met. And that was in a context where everybody was facing disrupted supply chains, and many supply chains are still disrupted. So the circumstances were unprecedented, but what the Commission is saying is that in those circumstances and at any time, businesses need to make sure that they have a reasonable basis to think that they can deliver in the time frame that they're promising to their customers.
What's a business's obligation when it takes your money for a particular item and then they don't have that item? It's not in stock.
Well, a number of businesses operate a shipping model, and it wasn't the case here actually, necessarily, where you order your goods, but they're in fact shipped from the supplier directly to the customer. That's a drop shipping model. And there's nothing wrong with that model, but again, businesses need to make sure that they can meet their customers' expectations about delivery. And the Consumer Guarantees Act promises consumers that even if a delivery time frame isn't specified, they can expect delivery within a reasonable time. And if they're not getting delivery within the reasonable time or within the time they've been told, they should take that up with their retailer.
But reasonable time is a pretty stretchy bow, isn't it?
Well, it will depend on a range of circumstances, and during the lockdown period in particular, we were all facing unprecedented circumstances. But taking into account the circumstances that are prevailing and the representations that have been made to customers, it's really a question of what a customer could reasonably expect in those circumstances, and they should talk to their supplier about it if they're not getting what they expect.
How many complaints did you get about this?
Well, we had a number of complaints relating to Noel Leeming during this period, which is why we chose a selection of those to investigate and focused on these particular products.
Any other retailers that you got complaints about in relation to this issue?
One, in relation to COVID and issues arising as a consequence of COVID, we did have a number of complaints this year, and those ranged from things like delivery of products, as in this case, to things like issues arising when travel was disrupted or events couldn't take place and that kind of a thing.
And are any of those still live investigations for you?
We have been working through a large number of complaints that we've received this year arising from COVID, and some of those investigations are still ongoing. Yep.
So in respect of the Noel Leeming issue, what is the comeback for the customer then? Should they be able to get their money back?
Well, each situation may vary, and our advice to consumers is that if you've got an issue with non-delivery, the first best port of call is with the supplier to determine what has happened. But yes, the Consumer Guarantees Act does entitle consumers to some remedies if they're not receiving delivery within reasonable timeframes. And what we've said in this case with Noel Leeming and to all businesses is that representations about delivery which are not reasonable can also breach the Fair Trading Act, and that can lead to a criminal prosecution.
So it's all very well saying take it up with the person you've made the purchase from, right, the retailer, but I see that a number of people who were complaining about this simply were not getting a response.
Yes, that was an element of the complaint that we received during the period where businesses were disrupted, but we would expect that businesses have ironed out those issues now and that they ought to have feasible contact details for people to get in touch if they're experiencing troubles. And that can arise particularly at this time of the year, when we're ordering things online for Christmas as well.
So you've given them an official warning, but actually what does it mean? Does it mean anything?
Well, what a warning does is explain the Commerce Commission's opinion that the conduct at issue is likely to have breached the law. Only the courts ultimately can make findings that the law has been breached, and that happens if we bring proceedings against a company in the court. We're not doing that in this case because Noel Leeming has been very cooperative. They have changed their conduct in relation to specifying delivery timeframes, and we've also recognised that these two issues arose during a really difficult time for all businesses, including Noel Leeming Group, where we had unprecedented consumer demand for online services and delivery was significantly impacted as well.
So Anna, though, if it is simply a warning, it's not going to court, is this a situation where, well, it's almost like two strikes? If they do it again, will you take further action?
We always do take into account previous conduct for businesses if another issue arises in the future. And importantly, in this case too, Noel Leeming Group doesn't have a strong history of issues arising through our complaints, and we considered that was appropriate here. But if issues arise in the future, we would take it into account when we decide what to do then.
And that's Anna Rawlings from the Commerce Commission.